Well, good morning and happy Sabbath, everybody. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear God of heaven and earth, thank you so much for the seasons that we have, and beauty that each one contains, as well as some of the challenges. And just look forward to the earth making. And we ask that you'll be present with us now, with each one of us, with me as facilitator, and we just ask that you bless and enlighten and help us on our heavenward journey. In Jesus' name, before His son. Amen. And I am going to share my screen. But just as I do that, I'm going to just let you know that the topic that I've chosen for today is women's health. And I'm going to run through, and not necessarily totally all in this order, because there'll be some overlap and so on, but dates, definitions, data, and disaster. So in essence, sort of 4 different parts. It's a broad topic, and so it's not going to be a comprehensive study. I'm not an expert on any of it. And as most of us know, it's the things that interest us or what impacts us personally, often that becomes what it is we look into. So at this point, I'm simply going to be sharing some of the things that I've learned along this journey of life, and therefore it'll be somewhat of an overview, recognizing that each topic could be its own subject matter, and then some. I'm going to begin with a quotation. More women are enslaved in the home than they are directly by the government. Elder Tess spoke that during the study in 2022. And I just wanted to begin by sort of highlighting that the personal is political, because many times what women are experiencing in their immediate environment needs to become political issues. And in many cases, that's sort of the story of women's health over the eons of time, but more particularly in the last century and a half. And so we'll trace a little bit of that. And I'm going to stop screen sharing now. The beginning part, as it said in the title, dates. So I'm going to run through a few dates, some of which, maybe all of which, most of us are familiar, but I'm just going to review some of it and bring out some highlights. So first date, 1873, the Comstock Act actually originated in 72, but it was amended, so it's the 1873 one we often refer to. And it made it a criminal offense to use the U.S. Postal Service to send any of the following things: obscenity, lewdness, contraceptives, abortive abortifacients, abortifacients, anything that contributes to an abortion, including the paper instructions of how to do it. Nowadays, a lot of people Google all sorts of things, including things like bomb making and whatever. So, back in the 1800s, it became illegal to mail instructions on how to perform an abortion, even on yourself. Sex toys, personal letters with any sexual content or information. I found myself wondering a little how on earth they were expecting to enforce something like that, barring opening all the letters. I mean, it wasn't the day where they had scanners and that kind of thing, right? So obviously pornography, anything or any information, it's the paper form written out regarding the above items. And as it's revised in for today, it actually, the Comstock Act actually only pertains to obscene, in other words, pornographic, crime inciting, or abortion-related articles or mail matter. Next date is going to be 1965. Jump fair amount. There could be all sorts of dates I could have chosen, but I've stuck to a few particular ones. Griswold versus Connecticut. And it's a case heard at the Supreme Court, where the court ruled that the US Constitution protects the liberty of married couples to use contraceptives without any government restriction or interference. So pertaining particularly to contraception for married couples. And that brings us to the next date, which is Eisenstadt versus Baird. And Bill Baird, considered a reproductive rights pioneer, which is interesting because nowadays we have a lot more men who are interested in reproductive rights for females. And so it was nice to know that back in the 1960s and 70s, there were people that were fairly interested, men, as well as women, that were interested in rights for women, and particularly to do with reproductive rights. So Bill Baird, he's sometimes referred to, certainly in the media, maybe a little more back in time, because he's probably not necessarily known about that much today, but referenced as the father of modern birth control and the abortion rights movement. He, interestingly, was a non-lawyer, and he won 3 different cases at different times brought before SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the USA. And that in itself is a feat for a non-lawyer to win cases in the highest court of the land. Would have been quite something. And I know, having sat in on various court situations, they're generally, and not to stereotype or anything, but they're generally tends to be reticence of lawyers fully accepting people who represent themselves. I won't say there's a snobbishness, but often people who are trained professionally in whatever profession often end up looking down a little bit, at least in that context in which their profession is, on people who are untrained. So he definitely had some real talent and skills to be able to win his cases before the Supreme Court. And He also established the first abortion referral center in 1963 in New York State, which I found was interesting. And I want to quote the Supreme Court Justice, William J. Brennan, who wrote the ruling decision. If the right of privacy means anything, it is the right of the individual to be free from unwarranted governmental intrusion into matters so fundamentally affecting a person as to whether to bear or beget a child. And his other two SCOTUS victories were in 1976 and 1979, not necessarily earth-shattering in a sense, but those cases gave minors the right to abortion without parental consent. So a 16 or 17-year-old, 18-year-old would be able to have at that time, have an abortion without having to have their parents sign off on it. And next one is Roe v. Wade, 1973. We covered a fair amount. I probably won't say too much new, but Norma McCorvey was the real Jane Roe, and she herself had a fairly abusive upbringing. She had lesbian leanings when she was younger, and consequently, as a young teen, was sent to a reformatory school. Obviously not a time period when anything to do with homosexuality, never mind transgenderism, but would have been very much taboo. And she had 3 children. The first child was raised by her mother. The second one was given up for adoption. And when she became pregnant a third time, she wasn't ready to parent a third child at all. She wasn't ready to parent, period. She had a daughter and sought out how she could have an abortion. And Gloria Allred became her lawyer. She actually didn't have the abortion. Her daughter was born, and if I remember correctly, it was also put up for adoption. But Gloria Allred became her lawyer, and she's a famous women's rights legal advocate and well, I'll say feminist, and taking the part of the oppressed in various cases. Some of the famous ones that she was involved in, she represented the women involved in such cases as those brought against O.J. Simpson, Tiger Woods, Bill Cosby, and more recently, Alec Baldwin just had the getting off the hook pronouncement a week and a half back, and but she represented the Rust family, the family of the young woman who was shot and killed on the Rust set. Anyway, Norma McCorvey had become, in a sense, sort of the poster child for the anti-abortion groups. Later on, she ended up admitting that they used her. She was sort of ignorant and young and just got caught up in it and anyway, didn't really believe in anti-abortion herself, and later on ended up becoming a Christian, and etc. Well, I should say later on, she had become a Christian, and they sort of latched on to her religious right. And anyway, she filled in all of that information more as kind of a deathbed confession. But Roe v. Wade changed the tide and definitely gave impetus to the women's rights movement, feminism, second wave of feminism, and by extending to women the right to have autonomy over their own body and have the final say in their reproductive rights. The next case is 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And in this case, and I'm not going into too much details because some of this has been covered in other studies, and I don't want to be too repetitive, but the SCOTUS upheld the right to have an abortion as established by the essential holding, in other words, affirming Roe v. Wade, and issued as its quote unquote key judgment the restoration of the undue burden standard when evaluating state imposed restrictions on that right. So in other words, Planned Parenthood v. Casey established the efficacy and the immutability of, at least at that point, Roe v. Wade and the right of women to have an abortion. And one other thing that Planned Parenthood v. Casey did was it did adjust one aspect of Roe v. Wade. The trimester framework of Roe v. Wade in 1973 was overturned by the Supreme Court in favor of a viability analysis when a fetus is viable to live outside the womb kind of analysis. And that allowed states to implement abortion restrictions that apply during the first trimester of pregnancy. Hence, we've been aware all of the state involvement, state level, well, some of those subsequent SCOTUS rulings, whereby individual states have different policies now that they've put in place. Texas with its I think it's a 6-week, I was going to say 5-week, but 6-week ban and no exemptions for rape, incest, and all the way through, some way in at 11 weeks, some at 16, whatever. There's variations on a theme. And of course, Donald Trump has, with his last week released, well, actually a week and a half back, it released Republican platform that he mainly wrote from what has been reported. He's sort of stepped back from the really, really, really stringent kind of abortion ban, such as what Texas has had in place, which is a lot of what the religious right has been pushing for. Total federal abortion ban and make it the most onerous, patterned after the Texas law. Anyway, the open-endedness, this viability analysis from Planned Parenthood v. Casey, it has left some leeway for some of these subsequent cases and some other things happening down the line. Anyway, next one is mention a date, 1999. And what that pertains to is Women's Health Initiative report. I'll explain about the Women's Health Initiative. It was a long-term national health study funded by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. It began in the early 1990s and concluded in 2005, being cut short of its intended 8.5 years. And I'll explain why in a moment. It focused on the prevention of heart disease, so cardiovascular disease, cancer, particularly breast cancer, and osteoporosis in postmenopausal women, and was based on 1992 knowledge, the day, and used, they called it MHT, menopausal hormone therapy, pertinent to women in menopause. That was the leading prescription at the time. And what was used was actually an oral estrogen that definitely in later research and so on, definitely, especially when not combined with progesterone, definitely has some negative effects and can in some instances even lead to something like breast cancer. However, the study itself, some have argued since 1999, but the study itself was not as robust a study in some respects as what the parameters would need to be today for scientific research and studies. Many of the women used in the studies had pre-existing health issues, and the average age of the women used in the study was 63 years of age. So many of the women into their 60s, and some of them even well into their 60s. The WHI, Women's Health Initiative report came out, and the biggest conclusion drawn from it was that hormone therapy increases the risk of breast cancer in menopausal women. Full stop. Now, the reason that the study was stopped early, and I'll read out the scientific jargon, so forgive me for a moment, because the hazard ratio of breast cancer, although not statistically significant, met, this is where the problem lay, met a very conservative preset data safety monitoring board, so a body called the Data Safety Monitoring Board, DSMB, statistical parameter. Now, that statistical parameter actually only focused on cardiovascular health and breast cancer in its parameters. And because of the results that came in, although not statistically significant, it was mandated, a recommendation was mandated to close the study, which is why it was abruptly cut off. In other words, in layman's terms, they felt that the study was bringing too much danger to some of the women participating in the study who were having the oral estrogen, menopausal hormone therapy, and therefore they were unwilling to continue it any further. Media of the day glossed over the benefits of hormone therapy these are now some of the very important benefits, which I'll go into a little more later, but for bone health, helping prevent osteoporosis, the reduction in colon cancer, that's what my own dad died of, and colon cancer is actually very prevalent, which is why people have administered colonoscopies and a variety of different other ways to track that health. And the absence of mortality. So these were the benefits of hormone therapy: the bone health, the reduction in some cancers, particularly in this case, colon cancer. At that time, it was already evident there was a help with hormone therapy, and also the lack of deaths. There were no deaths from hormone therapy whatsoever. And instead, the media really played up this, what in many minds got put as a causal relationship between hormone therapy and breast cancer, and then adding to that heart health, cardiovascular disease. And so it never fully became clear with the release of that report in 1999 that there was really not a lot of evidence, not significantly measurable evidence to come to that conclusion. And as a result, that primacy rule that whatever we hear first sort of stays in our mind. Whatever we learn first, trying to unlearn it is more problematic than just learning it in the first place. That first item is often what stays with us. And sometimes later we have a hard time trying to remember, now which way was it? Was that the right way? Or anyway, it stuck. Hormone therapy causes breast cancer. So 2002 and 2003, the Women's Health year 4 and year 5 of the study, this ongoing study from the 1990s on to, well, the last year was the 5th year, 2005. But what ended up happening was data from the WHI study in years 4 and 5 that drive the statistics developed by this DSMB board did not reflect biological significance. So yet again, it definitely, there was no biological significance for the results of hormone therapy on the menopausal women in the study. However, it never really got highlighted in media. They didn't come out and say, oh, now hormone therapy is exonerated. There is no causal relationship with breast cancer, etc. And so the hysteria that had been generated, and it can be termed as a hysteria in a sense. Everybody sort of, oh. And people who were on hormone therapy instantly got off. Physicians were left floundering, and in many cases, literally in the dark. They didn't know one way or the other, and they didn't have a lot of training and a lot of grounding in women's issues and hormone therapy in the first place. So, and so that this whole narrative continues right down to our day and affects women and physicians, medical people to this very day. Many times, the Women's Health Initiative report is cited as justification against HRT, hormone replacement therapy, today, and not recognizing sort of some of the background information on that WHI report. Anyway, moving on. Another court case. And 2022. Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization came about just 2 years ago, June 24th, and all of us were paying attention to that. And it was when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the ingrained for 50 years right for women to have an abortion, poof, gone, despite Charles Thomas. One or two of the other of the justices sort of indicate, oh, no, we're not going to tamper. But at any rate, and also Planned Parenthood, the Casey was overturned. The case that had affirmed Roe v. Wade, and it makes sense that the second case, Planned Parenthood one, would have to be overturned if you're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, because the second one just simply affirmed the first one. And yes, I won't go into more on that. I know I've talked about it, and I think others have as well. But it was a for many, it was a shocking decision. Many of the, certainly the radical feminists in general, have been warning that's exactly the way things are tending. Abortion's going to be on the chopping block. Came past. So 2024, I just want to highlight this FDA recent June 13th, 2024. So I'm probably all aware as well, but FDA, Federal Drug Administration, agency of the federal government of the United States, FDA, the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, AHM. So that was, it's a group. Well, that's it. A group of doctors brought a lawsuit, and it ended up percolating its way up as high as the US Supreme Court, SCOTUS. And they brought the lawsuit. They were all anti-abortion doctors, surprise there, to stop access to the abortion pill mifepristone. And so what SCOTUS did was it threw out this lawsuit the doctors were bringing to prevent mifepristone from being able to be administered anywhere. And of course, it's the known as the abortion pill, one of the two abortion pills, whereby people were accessing it by having it mailed to them. I'm not sure if it was on Amazon, possibly wasn't, but at any rate, they were able to order it from whatever agency outside of a state that was already had enacted anti-abortion bans and so on, or abortion bans, I should say. And so the court ruled that these physicians didn't have legal authority to bring the case in the first place, also known as legal standing. And so in ruling thus and throwing out this lawsuit, it basically has just sort of delayed. There've been a few cases like that the Supreme Court has done, but has delayed, I'll just say, decision on abortion medication, such as these abortion pills, mifepristone in particular, but the other thing is abortion itself. This is just one more of those, sort of leaves it all in a gray area and just kicks the can further down the road, so to speak. And I wanted to highlight still under threat in 2024, still under threat. Abortion itself, IVF, vitro fertilization, vitro fertilization, and contraception. And remember, contraception, the Eisenstadt case, 1972, and actually it was a foam contraceptive, a vaginal foam contraceptive that they were using back in 1972. That Bill Baird had been, how he got arrested was he'd been handing out, and he got arrested, and he was just really believing in the rights of women to make these decisions and to have their own autonomy, have autonomy over their own bodies. Okay, dates, definitions. I'm just going to quickly come to, and thanks Sakai for the link. You had it on Gloria already. Perhaps when you posted that, correct me if I'm wrong. And Netflix, and that's it. Or maybe it was on Norma McCorvey, the original Jane Doe in Roe v. Wade. I think I might have said Jane Roe, but she was the Jane Doe in Roe v. Wade. And yes, there are a variety of different YouTube things on Norma McCorvey and her life and just the impacts of the Roe v. Wade case in her own life. Okay, so we're going to go to share screen. Maybe share screen again because I can't honestly remember whether. I think I do want to just anyways. Another Tessa's quote. This over. So yeah, it's the timeline for those of you who haven't been able to read it on the actual whiteboard. Let me just check and see. Yes, okay. So this is some paraphernalia as well as some of the anatomy, drawing of the female anatomy, internal female anatomy a little bit there, and we see some what often got referred to as feminine hygiene products, intrauterine devices and tampons and pads and a variety of things that, yes. And so I'll stop share, actually, because I continue to keep viewing that, but I want you to understand the definition, what we can do for menstruation. And it's not only women who in some cases are ignorant of the anatomy of their own bodies, but often it is men. And men, why this topic has implications for men is because at some point in their life, they'll have possibly intimate relations, not every male does, but intimate relations with a female. And just being educated can be a very good thing in terms of what affects, and it's true for any of us, either sex, any gender orientation, just to be aware of what pertains to others. Ignorance sometimes is what produces some of the prejudices and the willingness to understand, to propagate myths and misinformation and so on. So it's valuable information for all of us. And so menstruation. So bear with me because I'm not putting it into a PowerPoint slide, but also known as menses, M-E. Now, when I was a young person, maybe around 10, I almost thought it was menu. You know, menu. So I always sort of say menstruation, but it's menstruation, but it's also known as MENSES. And it's a noun, simply means, it refers to the process of women discharging blood and other materials from the lining of the uterus, also known as the womb, obviously, when there is no egg that has been fertilized to implant in the uterus. Interesting little factoid is a female baby or name categorized as female at birth will have all the eggs that will ever be produced at birth. They're there. So there is a finite number of eggs that a uterus will receive. The ovaries produce. The ovaries have a finite number of eggs. Anyway, healthy woman's ovaries release eggs, and that's called ovulation. Every month during reproductive years, and the menstrual periods therefore occur at intervals of about 1 lunar month, which is 28 to 29 days. It varies from puberty. And for girls, the average onset of puberty is 11 years of age. For boys, the average onset of puberty is 12 years of age. So that's why often science says boys mature a little bit later than girls, but in reality, pretty similar. And menstruation continues from puberty until menopause. Menopause, the average age for menopause is 51. But some can experience it a lot younger, and some not until quite a bit later. And menstruation stops during pregnancy. Once an egg is implanted in the uterus, menstruation, periods, menstrual cycle stops. Well, I'll say period stop. Menstrual cycle still is there in the background, just no ovary production of an egg, further ovulation at that point, and no further implanting of an egg. Although there are some anomalies where this is what happens, you know, a further egg can be produced and gets implanted in the fallopian tubes, or is it ectoscopic? I can't remember. I didn't look some of the different details up, but and the situation is let's say rare, because it does occur, but it isn't the usual. So during menstruation, menstrual blood and tissue flow from the uterus through the cervix and pass out of the body through the vagina. And of course, there are various taboos that have developed over time, history, even references in the Bible. Of course, as we know, menstruous woman, woman in having her flowers upon her, some of the different references in scripture that get latched on to justify, for example, Old Testament times can't sit where a menstruous woman has sat, and you get all sorts of fanaticism running away with some of those kinds of things to help feed this whole idea that menstruation is yucky, it's ugly, it's dirty, it's hence feminine hygiene products. Women are dirty, just this natural biological process that all females, people with a uterus, go through a large portion of their lives. And in some ways, some of this angst and painting things in such a light is akin to leprosy, unclean, unclean, unclean. Remember, the leopard had to call out. Well, it's not like a woman is going to announce when they're having their period. So how would anybody know at a bus stop? Oh, that person's on their period, so I'm not going to sit there, kind of thing. And yet there are some extremes. People hold to some of these, as I say, fanatical, extreme kinds of ideas. And at this point, I just wanted to digress for a moment to two different things. And actually, no, I don't have a slide on. Uterine fibroids. There was these are fibroids that occur in the uterus, obviously. And there was a CBC news item that really caught my attention on June 18th. And I can put the link out to everyone later. It was kind of interesting, actually, but it's non-cancerous tumors that grow spontaneously inside the wall of the uterus. Very common, very, very common. With about 70% of women developing them before the age of 50, according to the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology Canada. And I'm just going to read a couple of things quickly. Fibroids are a significant source of health burden, discomfort, and they have an impact on quality of life for so many people, said Dr. Cindy Maxwell, an obstetrician and gynecologist and vice president of medical affairs at Women's College Hospital in Toronto. Symptoms can vary, but heavy menstrual bleeding, pain, debilitating pain, urinary problems, pelvic pressure, pressure on the bladder, anemia, and bloating are some of the key issues patients often deal with. So I want to pause for a second and just ask, can you imagine if a man was suffering with some of those symptoms? Would things have been addressed more quickly? Possibly more research being done, those kinds of things. Anyway, better late than never. Fibroids also can affect fertility and cause issues getting pregnant or threaten the ability to carry a pregnancy, especially in the early stages. Oh, and actually, I did end up putting in a slide. Pardon me. I think I've got mine out of order because I didn't want the second slide, so I'll just jump to it rather than this one. So there's again, female anatomy, uterus, and fallopian tubes, ovaries, cervix, cervix and vagina, vulva on the exterior. Anyway, fibroids. So you can see how many different places they can end up developing, and very, very painful. And as I said, debilitating and can interfere with reproductive potential. Options to treat fibroids have ranged from hormonal medications to stop heavy menstrual bleeding to intrauterine devices, IUDs, and pain medications, depending on the size of the fibroids. Often larger fibroids, surgery, hysterectomy, removing of the uterus, becomes the only option. But the size of the fibroids, their location, or the severity of symptoms is what determines whether surgery is implicated or just what. And data from the Canadian Institute for Health Information shows that between 2022 and 2023, there were a total of 10,094 hysterectomies, removal of the uterus, 6,032 myomectomies, which is the removal of the fibroids while keeping the uterus, and 561 embolizations, which is shrinking the fibroids by cutting off the blood supply across Canada. And those stats exclude Quebec. It has its own medical system. In the US, fibroids are the leading cause of hysterectomy surgeries, and it's estimated the health issue accounts for up to 34 billion annually in direct and indirect costs, according to the Journal of the American Medical Association. And there are also, surprisingly, racial disparities, with the risk of fibroids higher for Black women. Research has shown they are more likely to develop fibroids at a younger age, develop larger fibroids, and experience more severe symptoms. They also have higher rates of the invasive surgeries, such as hysterectomy. Second thing I want to just digress for a moment to is abortion and miscarriage. We've spoken a little bit about abortion, but I wanted to just quote a physician. Well, I'll just read. Dr. Allison Jamil, lead author of this study. She did a study and to show the detrimental effects for babies' health as well as women's health, but she was focusing particularly on babies, the health of babies, when no abortion has been allowed. Lead author of the study and a demographer and reproductive epidemiologist with 113 peer-reviewed studies to her name. And this is what she says in an article in Mother Jones on her study. To be clear, from the maternal health standpoint, pregnancy can be very dangerous for women. While maternal death itself is rare, severe maternal complications are not nearly as rare as people might think, especially if you have risk factors. In the US, a lot of people have risk factors. And then there are complications like miscarriage, which are a very common experience that people don't talk about enough. About 10 to 20% of known pregnancies in the US end in miscarriage. Miscarriage management is an important issue to bring into this conversation because sometimes you need to have an induced abortion to treat that miscarriage. Dilation and curettage is a name that is often people think it's synonymous with abortion, but it's a process. Basically, it's just scraping the inside of the uterus out, cleaning out anything that's there. And so in miscarriages, and many times miscarriages, there can end up being real complications with a woman who has experienced a miscarriage in that all of the uterine lining, the umbilical cord, some aspect of what was growing inside the uterus doesn't all get sloughed out of the woman's body and can lead to infection, sepsis, all sorts of things. I know of at least 2 young women. Well, I know of 2 young women that had a miscarriage, one case, multiple miscarriages, and ended up with some of these complications. And if they weren't able to have gotten to hospital and have the D&C or whatever process, would be administered in whatever hospital, the likelihood of death is very great. So it is a serious thing. Another complication that comes to mind is preterm birth. In the US, 1 in 10 babies are born prematurely, and the rate is much higher if you're Black or live in certain states. And then likewise, about 1 in 12 babies are born too small. These are not rare outcomes, and they have lifelong impacts. I hope my husband won't mind me mentioning, hopefully not, but common knowledge, a lot of us know it, but he was born prematurely. He was a preemie, and could fit inside a little hole, a little cup. And he eventually was able to come home from hospital, and he weighed under 2 pounds at birth. And it's interesting because I have a niece who ended up delivering a premature baby 2 years ago, and she was thrilled to learn it put a lot of her fears at rest when she learned that her uncle had only weighed 2 pounds when he got under 2 pounds when he was born. And so, okay, need to move along because we're rapidly coming out of time. And so I'm going to move the D&C dilation and curettage. We're going to move to the other end of the spectrum and mention 3 stages of menopause. And at this point, I'll maybe put up my other screen. That was I've drawn on the whiteboard here, and I was going to redraw it on the whiteboard as well, but I think it's probably better if we just seeing it on the screen for a moment. A chiasm of women's health, and birth and death. Human beings are familiar with both ends of the spectrum of life. But here, I wanted to mark in the different phases, particularly pertinent to women, but childhood, obviously, up through to puberty, and puberty again. Like, so much of this happens at unique times, specific times. Each body is different. The development of each human being is a little different time schedule, and so on. Things happen when they're meant to happen. So puberty has a range, as I say, the average age for girls 11, for boys 12. Secondary sex characteristics kick in, breast development, and on. Teen years, often people sort of generalize and say, oh, hormones are running wild, and that explains some of the behavior and etc. But it's young people who are coming into preparation for adulthood. That's really what it is. And making their own decisions, being a part of that. And so adulthood, and then if we continue on, the perimenopause stage, Again, every woman's body is unique. Every person having a uterus has a different timeline in their developmental phases. And so perimenopause, the period that is, in a sense, preparing toward menopause. Perimenopause is can range in ages from 40s, early 40s through. There are some young people in their late 20s, mid to late 20s, that have experienced perimenopause. Some actually even that have gone into menopause, where it's been actually diagnosed, and talk about problems with getting that all sorted out, because of course it's not a case that, for example, a 27-year-old, and she actually was a physician, there is a physician himself, going through menopause. No, the symptoms you're experiencing got to have some other explanation, but at any rate, perimenopause ranges, I'll just generalize to say 40s through 10 years prior to menopause, 4 to 10 years prior to menopause for perimenopause. Menopause, it is 1 year in duration. Menopause basically is when a woman has had menstruation occurring, and then, and I'll go into that in a moment, but, and then there is a gap of 12 months or more. And so menopause, and then once that menopause has been established, that year of no periods is there, it's considered post-menopause. The woman is, the person without a uterus, or with a uterus, is post-menopausal. And that, of course, carries you through to the point when that individual would die. So the menstruating years basically cover from puberty to menopause. And with that in mind, just quickly going through some of the definition side of the menopause. It's from the Greek words mens for month, related to the word moon, that lunar cycle, 28, 29 days for the menstrual cycle, and pausis for cessation or stopping. So fairly obvious definition or etymology. The root at which a person with a uterus stops menstruating for one year, 12 months. No more eggs are being released by the ovaries, so no ovulation is occurring. And once that is hit, there's no more fertility. So person isn't able, as soon as there are no eggs being released by the ovaries, I mean, there is no ability to become pregnant. And people who have, for whatever reason, earlier in their life, and there are women in this situation, having had their ovarian cancer being one situation, but even younger women, reasons where they have their ovaries removed, will not actually experience menopause. And family history and genetics appear to play a role in the timing of menopause, but there's no way to know your exact menopause age until it's here. And it's often a case of women monitoring themselves and realizing, oh, this gap is stretched a little longer and a little longer, and coming to a place where they realize, oh boy, it's been a year since I've had my last period. Hence, you can see where there gets to be a little bit of a gray area, women remembering sort of, and sort of really being able to nail down, oh yes, I went through menopause in, whatever year that it was. So, and so the 3 stages of menopause: perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, which of course means after menopause. And some of the symptoms, because of the low levels of hormones being produced, estrogen and progesterone particularly, but the menopausal symptoms may become more mild, or even go away completely. Very fortunate situation. Doesn't occur with everyone. And otherwise, sometimes the symptoms, maybe gradually getting more mild, and so on. They may last for 10 years. Some more recent research indicates that they can last longer, in which case it's lent itself to more modern research endorsing what a lot of menopausal specialists and physicians are doing, and that is having hormone replacement therapy, HRT, ongoing for women, 60s, 70s, I would suggest possibly even into the 80s. I didn't specifically look into them, but at any rate, and I just want to quickly cover some perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms, because this, I know I was educated on. I had no idea. As I say, there's in some cases an ignorance amongst we who are women, we who are female even, on some of this, because the information didn't used to be readily available. And anyway, like with the uterine fibroids, I mean, some of the research being done now in Toronto, Sunnybrook Hospital and so on, I mean, they're coming out with less invasive treatments and that are being developed. Some of them, there are 3 different things. Some of them have been available in the US for quite a number of years, but at least finally now things are becoming more researched and available in Canada for women. So there is some research that is centering on women's health and women's issues in more modern time. But anyway, symptoms for perimenopausal and menopausal women. And I'm just going to read through this because, and this was something that I hadn't known, because the 3 sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, affect all over the body. Symptoms can be experienced all over the body. For example, estrogen is produced in the brain, as well as the adrenals, not only in the ovaries. And the hormone levels of these 3 in particular, what we're focusing on for this purpose, affects organs, tissues, cells all over the body. So hence some of the symptoms. Irregular periods. So ovulation becomes more irregular. Women can have periods that stretch with wider gaps between them. Women can have shorter duration periods, in some cases, sometimes more intense, though, with some of what they experience while having that period. And in essence, the periods, you can skip a period for a couple of months, 2 months, and then they restart again, and then so it's spotty timing, spotty periods, and so on. And vaginal dryness and bladder issues. So again, lowering estrogen levels and vaginal tissues lose lubrication and elasticity. And so intercourse can become painful. Urinary or vaginal infections, UTIs, and other kinds of vaginal infections, urinary and vaginal infections can occur. And incontinence, because the tissue tone is lost, and therefore incontinence, leaking. You know, a lot of jokes get made about things like Depends and on and on. That happens to be a specific brand, but and again, these put downs of zeroing in on women and some of the things that they end up experiencing. And this again is sometimes where HRT becomes a paradigm shift, because a lot of the symptoms can be alleviated or will be alleviated as hormone levels are replaced and boosted again. Challenge is every woman's body being different, finding the right dosages and the right combinations, the right methods and forms of application or administration, and so on. Hot flashes, also known as hot flushes, different jurisdictions. A suffusion of heat spreading across the body. The intensity, length, and frequency varies person to person. Night sweats, akin to the sweat when one breaks a fever, varies in duration, frequency, and intensity as well. Sometimes bedclothes and bedding needs to be changed. It's that much of a release of moisture, sweat. Sleep problems. Sleep can become unpredictable even when not experiencing hot flashes or night sweats. Mood changes. Mood swings, irritability, or increased risk of depression may occur, whether due to hormonal changes, disrupted sleep, or other factors. It's not just menopause that brings on some of these things, or low hormone levels. Weight gain and slowed metabolism. Bone loss. Declining estrogen levels cause bone to be lost more quickly than it's replaced, increasing the risk of osteoporosis, a disease causing fragile bones, and the risk broken bone and risking broken bones if a fall. Thinning hair or hair loss, alopecia. We shed 50 to 100 single hairs per day, and it's part of the natural balance. Hairs fall out, new hairs grow in and replace them. And in perimenopause or menopause, hair loss can end up being more than 125 hairs per day lost. So when you're an individual is noticing a lot of hair, you know, in a hairbrush, or a lot of hair in the sink or in the shower after showering, whatever, it can sometimes, if it's unduly more, it can indicate some of these hormone changes. Dry skin, loss of breast fullness, changes in sexual function, sexual arousal and desire may change. Satisfactory sexual intimacy beforehand in all of the years leading up can continue with having good sex well into perimenopause and beyond, even in menopause. And changing cholesterol levels, diminishing estrogen levels may cause an increase in LDL, low density lipoprotein, and an increase also in the high density lipoprotein, HDL. And both those situations can be problematic in the risk of heart disease. And brain fog and memory issues. And then some other symptoms that are not necessarily identified by many physicians as connected to perimenopause or menopause, but one of the physicians in the UK, it brings this out and with some of the science behind it, and she's a clinician that has dealt with perimenopausal and menopausal and menstruating women for a lot of years. Anyway, lightheadedness and dizziness when standing up. Tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, and that's because nerves are not working properly. And some of these things can be caused or due to other factors as well. But at the same time, these are some of the symptoms as well that can be connected with menopause. Hypersensitive hearing. You hear things so well, it's irritating. Different noises become hyper loud and you're bothered by it. Teeth grinding and even dreaming can be affected by hormone levels. Dry eyes, watery eyes, not having enough tears, and lubrication in the organs, including our skin, heartburn, reflux, bloating, shortness of breath. Without hormones, the bronchi down to the alveoli, the narrowest little air sacs, narrow and make breathiness more common. Chills. Experiencing a cold chill is more a symptom of menopause than a hot sweat. Hot sweats, hot flushes, was taught as the main symptom of menopause, but actually experiencing a cold chill is more a symptom of menopause. ADHD symptoms will worsen during both periods as well as during menopause phase. Gingivitis, the swelling and inflammation of the gums. Sore mouth, burning mouth syndrome, mouth ulcers. Skin conditions, rosacea, acne, vomiting. Hormone levels affect gut flora and the microbiome. Changing smell. Women often in perimenopause and menopause can have more acute smell. They smell things more strongly. So some things become offensive and they don't like that smell anymore. And internal tremoring, a vibrating sensation going on in the body. Hormones affect the functioning of our physical nerves. And I want to reiterate the four main symptoms of menopause not being hot flushes, and sweats, night sweats. Anxiety, memory problems, brain issues, memory loss, brain fog, memory loss, low mood, just not having motivation, and brain fog. And hormones and the hormones are the little chemical messengers and tell our body what to do and when. And their hormones are involved in growth, development, metabolism, emotions, sexual and reproductive function, sleep, blood pressure. In other words, the functioning of your physical and mental health. And I want to reiterate again, I think I did say it earlier, hopefully I did. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are found in every female and male body. Men have estrogen, progesterone, as well as testosterone. Women have testosterone, as well as estrogen and progesterone. All of them are implicated in a variety of different organs, the health of a variety of different organs, particularly the brain, But otherwise as well, I probably am not going to have time to go into some of those things. Hormones originate in the endocrine system. In the endocrine system, and the endocrine system is a system of organs containing glands that create and release hormones into the bloodstream, and hormones travel to all your organs and tissues, where receptors in your cells recognize and respond to them. And the endocrine system and the hormones it produces help the body maintain homeostasis, which is simply a constant internal environment, equilibrium, in response to internal and external changes. And it's the hormones that help our body to function properly. So I'm going to jump in because I'm out of time pretty much. I can see. And so I'm going to come to share screen again and see if I can finish off in fairly short order. Let me see. So the data, and I've sort of sprinkled data throughout in a little bit, so I'm not going to emphasize data as its separate section right now because we've covered some of it. But what I do want to do is highlight, in terms of the data, some different books, sources, and so on. And these are ones that I came across that particularly personally were ones I felt I wanted to either pursue or felt that they were good grounding. So Dr. Jen Gunter is a Canadian OB/GYN, obstetrician gynecologist with 30 years of clinical experience, mainly in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but she's now practicing in San Francisco, our loss, California's gain. And she has over 30 years experience as a vulvar, to do with the vulva, the external lips of the vagina and the cervix, and vaginal diseases expert. And she's also the author of the Preemie Primer, the Vagina Bible, and the Menopause Manifesto, 2010, 2019, 2021. In this book, Blood, the Science, Medicine, and Mythology of Menstruation, it dispels the shame, mythology, and misinformation around menstruation with scientific facts, medical expertise, and a fierce feminist perspective. Jen writes, you don't have to think about your liver 5 days a month for 30 years. So I'd argue people should know more about the uterus. Here. Offers a clear, no-nonsense guide to reproductive anatomy and answers all the questions you never knew you had about menstrual bleeding. For example, where does the blood come from? Where does it go? If you miss a period, why do we even menstruate in the first place? Okay, more data. Oh, there we go. The Vagina Bible, the vulva and the vagina. Maybe she's an expert. Separating the myth from the medicine. So comprehensively tackles the maelstrom of misinformation around female sexual health. Aims to dispel misunderstandings and myths held by so many people. For example, many do not know that the vagina is self-cleaning, that condoms should be used with a lubricant, that eating sugar does not cause a yeast infection, and that intercourse should not be painful. Equally educated for the 16-year-old through to, then I stretched it a little bit, 96-year-old, for those wanting to know more about new developments in their anatomy, including transgenders with new anatomy, for those wanting to optimize a healthy sex life for as long as possible, and for those wanting to provide factual information to relatives. Young people gaining puberty and beyond, or never. And then this is a book that I actually ended up purchasing. The Menopause Manifesto, Own Your Own Health with Facts and Feminism. Provides knowledge by countering stubborn myths that just won't let go, clearing up misunderstandings about menopause with hard facts, real science, fascinating historical perspective, and expert advice. Debunks misogynistic attitudes and challenges the over-mystification of menopause, helping to bring this natural phase of life into trending mainstream awareness with humor and truth. And it's interesting, in these most recent years, some of the explosion in interest dealing with these topics, perimenopause, menopause, and a lot of the answering research and books. So as I say, some things are changing a little for the better, gradually. Still have a long way to go, but quoting Jen, menopause is not a disease, it's a planned change like puberty. And just like puberty, we should be educated on what's to come years in advance. Oh, if I only had had some further insights and information years back, rather than the current practice of leaving people on their own with bothersome symptoms and too much conflicting information. Knowing what is happening, why, and what to do about it is both empowering and reassuring. And not every medical person is going to be open and informed in reference to, for example, young people in their 30s and 40s, some of the symptoms that they are starting to experience, being able to steer them in the right direction, or people in their 40s and even into their 50s. And not every medical practitioner is open to HRT. The Women's Health Initiative of 1999 is the benchmark that many medical people look back to be against hormone therapy. Okay. And this is the UK GP that has a general practitioner that has, certainly in the UK, made a real name for herself, but it goes beyond through different areas of Europe and so on, as a pioneering menopause specialist. She founded the Newson Health Menopause and Wellbeing Center, allowing people from all over the world to book consultations in person, right there. She's in Stratford-on-Avon, or in over the media, aka Zoom calls. Dr. Newsom started the Balance app, where individuals can diary their symptoms, access research, amongst other aspects, and started a similar Balance website. Her book of 13 chapters begins with hormones and their importance, deals with hormone deficiency and perimenopause and menopause, explains HRT, and deals with health aspects of menopause related to hair and skin, mental health, cancer, exercise, nutrition, lifestyle, and family history. And we are so blessed in our God-given health aspects. And we must always take that and appreciate it for what it really is, a gift from God. And I'll just close with the last B in the title was dates, definitions, data, and disaster. And I won't say too much because we're out of time, but things like period poverty, things like the unequal playing field, and where race and socioeconomics so much factor into the issues that women are dealing with wherever geographically around the world. You add to it culture and taboos and these strong culturally, socially indoctrinated attitudes, and add to it gender orientation and so much of the misinformation that's out there, and the tropes and the narrative that's being fed by one side of the political spectrum, in particular, over on the right. And even Donald Trump reaffirming, in his acceptance speech, and ensure that men are not competing with in women's sport, and on and on. And it's just building, and is disastrous for people in a lot of marginalized minority groups, just what is happening all over the world. Research being stigmatized away from considering women's health for so many decades and decades, underfunded, the biases of male researchers and scientists, grant allocation, all of these things. The myths and inaccuracy that have been allowed to just remain, if not actually build in importance in the minds of at least some. And things like, comes out every once in a while, a study being done, tampons, they have lead and arsenic and plastic in them, something that is inserted internally into a person with a uterus's vagina. And, where's the outcry? If men were, you think of prostate health and how much often you hear about it just out there, and men, having regular or after a certain age checks, and, in some cases surgeries, and on and on. And the attention so often has been, under the patriarchal system of Earth's history, has been directed away from women, and men being the center of so much. And yes, so I'm going to end there. The wonderful thing is that there is some research being done by all sorts of people, men, women, and I'm sure other genders as well, providing some of the scientific, factual evidence and truths that will debunk the myths and bring more clarity to the whole situation. So the newer generations are being given an opportunity to be able to not have to unlearn some of the misinformation, but instead have the opportunity to learn right from the get-go the straight goods, and apply it in your own lives as they come through some of these different phases, and experience differing symptoms. Remembering every body is unique. And so we'll close there. So let's have any comments, or, well, actually, we'll close with prayer and open it up after the closing hymn. Dear God of heaven and earth, we thank you so much that you are willing to enlighten us and teach us on so many issues that are important for the dispensation in which we now are, as we continue restoring the equality that was lost as sin entered. And we just pray that we will become wise and knowledgeable, and be able to, as well, inform others and help them to see wherein some of the things that they have held to, whether it's to do with menopause, menstruation, or the whole prophetic narrative that some things they've held dear to their hearts as truth are wrong. So bless each of us in our spheres of influence, and we just ask that you continue to be our guide and to bless us. In Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.